na bumaba ka sa likod at sa ating tatuan sana ingay sumikot. Sabi natin
At the edge of Manila, beyond the scent of diesel and dried fish, lies a place the city has quietly forgotten, Navotas Cemetery.
Only stay over there, and we don't want to get inside.
Is it dangerous?
But this isn't just a burial ground. It breathes. Children laugh between crumbling tombstones. Mothers cook over makeshift stoves atop crypts. The dead lie beneath, while the living build homes above them. Here, the silence of death is drowned out by the noise of survival. A 17-year-old girl hangs laundry beside her unborn child's future resting place. A boy plays basketball in a court marked by names of the deceased. This is no ghost story. This is the city's most haunting truth. Number 1, the revolution that drove people to Manila. To understand how families came to live among tombs and fading names carved in stone, we have to turn back time, to a moment when the country itself stood on the edge of transformation. It was February 1986, a time when fear still lingered in the alleyways of Manila and voices of dissent were quickly silenced. For over 20 years, President Ferdinand Marcos ruled the Philippines with an iron grip, martial law, censorship, and corruption at every level. But then came EDSA. Not a battle, but a miracle of people. Over 2 million Filipinos filled the streets, armed not with weapons, but with candles, prayers, and unshakable courage. Soldiers lowered their guns. Tanks stopped rolling, and in a few days the impossible happened. A dictator fell without a single shot fired. The People Power Revolution marked more than just the end of a regime. It lit a fire in the hearts of ordinary citizens, a belief that change was possible, that life could be better. Democracy was reborn. But freedom doesn't fill an empty stomach. And so, after the celebration faded, a quieter revolution began. One that moved not through protests, but through bus tickets, crowded terminals, and restless dreams. From the mountains of Luzon to the rice fields of Visayas and Mindanao, thousands left their homes. Farmers, fishermen, factory workers, they packed what little they had and headed to the capital. Manila was the beacon, the place where jobs, education, and a future seemed within reach. It became a magnet for hope, but hope, when it arrives all at once, becomes heavy. Number 2, Manila's growth left millions behind. Right after the revolution, hope came like rain on dry ground. Manila stood tall, the beating heart of a new Philippines ready to become a modern capital open to the world. And in many ways, it did. Foreign companies set up offices, trade expanded, and factories hummed with new energy. By the early 2000s, the Philippines was riding a wave of global investment, especially in manufacturing and the service sectors. Today, business process outsourcing alone contributes nearly 15% of the country's gross domestic product, that's over $50 billion annually. But as always, progress is rarely fair. While shiny office towers rose in Makati and Bonifacio Global City became a playground for the elite, a different story played out just miles away. One of congestion, inequality, and invisibility. The economic boom lifted many, but not all. The middle and upper classes secured better homes, private schools, and modern healthcare. Meanwhile, the poor, often new migrants from the provinces, were left to carve out survival on the margins. And that margin kept shrinking. As more people poured into Manila searching for opportunity housing, became a luxury most couldn't afford. The average cost of a small apartment in central Manila now exceeds 15,000 pesos per month. That's more than what many minimum wage workers earn. So they built their own homes, crude makeshift structures patched together with scrap metal wood and plastic sheets. Not on private land, but wherever there was space. Beside railways, along sewage canals, under overpasses, and sometimes among the dead. By 2025, government estimates show that over 4.3 million people live in informal settlements across Metro Manila. That's roughly 1 in every 5 residents. And these aren't just temporary shelters. They are full-blown communities with sari-sari stores, daycare centers, basketball courts, and churches growing vertically and horizontally in places never meant for life. But here's the catch. These areas often lack even the most basic infrastructure. Electricity comes from illegal connections, sparking frequent fires. Clean water is a daily gamble. Toilets are shared by dozens. Garbage piles up because trucks don't come here. And when typhoons hit, which they do more often now due to climate change, these neighborhoods are the first to flood and the last to be rebuilt. Still, people stay. Why? Because leaving means starting over with even less. Because the job, no matter how low-paying or unstable, is in the city. Because this fragile roof, this cramped corner, is still better than nothing. In some cases, even better than the relocation sites offered by the government, which are often built far outside the city, with no jobs, no transportation, and no hope. So what we have is a city of two realities, one rising paved and lit, the other sinking hidden and forgotten. And the deeper truth is this: the very hands that clean the homes, guard the gates, and cook the meals of Manila's rich go home to places where water leaks through the ceiling and candles light the night. This is not just an issue of poverty. It's a design flaw in the blueprint of urban growth, where speed has outpaced equity and where millions live not by choice, but by circumstance. And unless we're willing to rethink what development really means, these invisible cities made of tin and tarp and dreams will only keep growing, not upward, but outward into the shadows. Number 3, living on tombs in Navotas Cemetery. When the city ran out of space and patience, the poor had to find shelter in places no one else would dare to call home. In the northern part of Metro Manila, tucked between saltwater canals and narrow streets, lies Navotas Cemetery, a place meant for the dead, but long claimed by the living. From above, it looks like rows of gray concrete stacked like dominoes. But walk through the aisles, and you'll hear children laughing, radios playing, and the sound of laundry flapping in the wind. Roughly 6,000 people call this cemetery home. They live not around the graves, but on them. Families sleep atop tombs, cook beside mausoleums, and hang clothes between concrete crosses. These are not squatters in the traditional sense. They are residents of what some now call the vertical village of the forgotten. The tombs here aren't buried underground, but arranged in layers like shelves in a storage unit. And the bodies, they don't stay forever. Each tomb is leased for 5 years. After that, if the family can't afford to renew the contract, the remains are removed, cremated, relocated, or in some cases simply placed in a communal ossuary. And when that happens, another family moves, in this time not to bury, but to live. It sounds surreal, but for the residents of Navotas, it's just life. Many of them came here decades ago after being displaced from other informal settlements. Others arrived more recently, pushed out by rising rents and zero options. A single wooden shack built beside a tomb offers more security than the flood-prone streets or far-flung relocation sites with no jobs. And life strangely goes on. By day, the cemetery buzzes with activity. Some residents work as caretakers hired to repaint names on tombstones or clean up graves before All Saints' Day. Others take on more morbid tasks, cleaning old graves or guiding families to newly leased plots. It's a form of labor born from death. Children turn the alleys into playgrounds. They race past crumbling epitaphs, oblivious to what lies beneath their feet. A few even attend school nearby, their uniforms spotless despite the dust. Adults gather under makeshift roofs to play cards, share meals, or just talk. They celebrate birthdays, hold weddings, mourn losses, all within arm's reach of the deceased. It's a paradox. You can't unsee life thriving in a space designed for death. But make no mistake, this isn't romantic. The air smells of damp concrete, rot, and burnt plastic. There's no plumbing. Water comes from a shared hose. Bathrooms, if you can call them that, are built with scavenged tarps and rusted metal. During the rainy season, flooding turns walkways into swamps. Disease is common. Privacy is rare. And yet somehow there's dignity here. Despite the hardship, the residents of Navotas have built a kind of community, one stitched together not by bricks or titles, but by necessity, resilience, and sheer will. They look after each other. They find ways to laugh. They survive. As of 2025, informal cemetery communities exist in at least 5 other cities across the Philippines, but Navotas remains the most densely populated. It is quite literally a city within a city, invisible to outsiders, yet fully alive. And maybe that's the most haunting part. Not the proximity to the dead, but how easily the living can be ignored. Number 4. Faces of the Forgotten Dead End. In a narrow alley between 2 rows of stacked tombs beneath a fluttering tarp tied to rusted rebar lives, Marydel, a 17-year-old girl who's 2 months pregnant. Her belly is just beginning to swell. Her dreams, it's hard to say. She doesn't talk much about the future, at least not in the way teenagers usually do. No posters of pop stars, no plans for college. Her world is different. Her world is made of concrete graves and candlelight. She was born here among the dead, raised in the Navotas Cemetery, where generations have lived on top of those who no longer speak. And now she's preparing to bring a new life into that same world. A child born above the grave of someone else's story. When asked if she's afraid, she simply shrugs. No, she says this is home. That answer isn't brave. It's not even stoic. It's something else entirely, resignation disguised as resilience. For Marydel, living beside the dead isn't terrifying. It's ordinary. And that ordinariness is perhaps the most chilling detail of all. Her story is one among thousands, but it brings a human face to the statistics. According to the Housing and Urban Development Coordinating Council of the Philippines, by the year 2025, over 20% of the urban poor in Metro Manila are 2nd or 3rd generation settlers in informal spaces, including cemeteries. These aren't people who simply stumbled into poverty. They were born into it, raised in it. And in Marydel's case, preparing to raise someone else within it. Just down the path past the tomb where someone has set up a makeshift basketball hoop lives Dulcet, a woman in her early 60s with sharp eyes and rough hands. She's one of the oldest living residents in the cemetery. Her family moved here in the late 1980s, shortly after the EDSA revolution. At the time, there were only a handful of families. A few shacks, no electricity, no water, just graves and space. We didn't choose this life, she says. It chose us. Back then, it was supposed to be temporary. Just a few months, maybe a year. But 1 year turned into 10. 10 into 20. And now, 4 decades later, what began as a survival tactic has become a neighborhood complete with its own rules, rhythms, and routines. People call it the Graveyard Street. And while it may not exist on any official city map, it has the feeling of a community that's very much alive. Dulcet remembers when she and her husband first laid down plywood beside a neglected tomb, how they swept it clean, lit candles for the original occupant, and whispered a quiet apology. Then came neighbors. Then came tin roofs. Then came babies, many of whom have now grown up, married, and raised families of their own right there in the cemetery. Her grandchildren play marbles between tombstones. They don't ask why they don't have a front yard or a backyard. This is all they've ever known. Life, death, and everything in between stacked on top of each other like pages in a forgotten book. What makes Marydel and Dulcet's stories so powerful isn't the strangeness of their home. It's the normalcy they've built in the most abnormal of places. It's the quiet defiance of making a life not in spite of the circumstances, but within them. And maybe that's what Navotas really is. Not a symbol of tragedy, but of tenacity. A place where stories bloom, even in the shadow of the grave. Number 5. Life among the dead forgotten by the city. In most places, a cemetery is a place to rest, to grieve, to remember. But in Navotas, it's something else entirely. It's a neighborhood improvised, invisible, and alive. Here, tombs double as floors, gravestones as benches, and the silence of death is pierced daily by the sound of babies crying and radios playing love songs. It's not a horror film. It's not a metaphor. It's a city within a cemetery, and it's very real. What makes this place more than just unusual is what it says about the city around it. Manila, with its gleaming malls, high-rise condos, and fast-expanding business districts, likes to project the image of progress. The city has added more than 8 million residents since the early 1990s. By 2025, Greater Manila is home to over 22 million people. It is one of the most densely populated urban centers on Earth, but density doesn't mean inclusivity. And that's the heart of the contradiction. While billions of pesos flow through the veins of the city's financial heart, communities like Navotas Cemetery sit in the shadows, structurally neglected, socially ignored, and politically inconvenient. The residents here don't exist on formal census data. They're not factored into urban development plans. They live quite literally in the margins. And over time, they've become used to it. It's not just about poverty, it's about erasure. In Navotas, urbanization didn't bring high-speed trains or shopping plazas. It brought displacement. Families who couldn't keep up with the rising cost of rent and the vanishing supply of affordable housing were pushed to the city's physical and metaphorical edge, until that edge became a cemetery. And so the dead gained neighbors, and the living found silence. But silence is never complete in places like this. Life persists. Life insists. Despite the stench of sewage and smoke from open fires, despite the rain that turns tombstone pathways into muddy canals, people keep going. Children go to school, mothers cook, couples fall in love. Old men sit and swap stories as if their community was built on any other kind of ground. It's a powerful paradox, the living surviving on foundations built for the dead. There is something deeply symbolic about it, a kind of poetry laced with pain. On one hand, it's tragic that a society would let its poorest citizens sleep atop graves rather than offer shelter. On the other, it's a fierce testament to human endurance. Because if there's one thing stronger than a government's neglect, it's a human being's will to survive. Look closely, and you'll notice how the cemetery has created its own system, its own economy, its own unwritten rules. Outsiders may see chaos wires strung dangerously across headstones, kids playing basketball over burial vaults, but locals see order, a fragile, improvised but very real form of stability. This is not just a slum, it's a society born from necessity. And perhaps that's what makes Navotas Cemetery more than a tragic footnote in Manila's urban growth. It's a mirror, one that reflects everything we'd rather not see. That while the rich build upward, the poor are buried not 6 feet under, but 1 layer above. It is the clearest symbol yet of a city's failure to grow with compassion, and the clearest proof that even among the dead, life finds a way to rise. Number 6. Broken promises and failed relocation plans. For years, the government has promised a way out, a better life for the thousands living in places like Navotas Cemetery. On paper, it sounded hopeful. Formal relocation programs, socialized housing, new beginnings in the outskirts of Metro Manila. But the reality, much harsher than any press release would admit. In 2023, the Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development announced a renewed plan to relocate informal settlers from high-risk areas, including cemeteries, to government housing in Bulacan and Rizal provinces. These projects were framed as dignified, sustainable solutions. But when the residents arrived, they found empty lots, half-built structures, and a future that felt even more uncertain. Most of these relocation sites are located over 30 kilometers away from Manila's job centers. That's a 3-hour commute one way for a minimum wage worker. Public transport is sparse, often unreliable. Hospitals miles away, schools overcrowded or understaffed, and jobs practically non-existent. A study by the Philippine Institute for Development Studies in 2024 found that over 60% of relocated families eventually returned to the city, citing loss of income, food insecurity, and isolation as key reasons. As one resident put it bluntly, "We moved to escape the dead, but ended up buried in debt." That's the great irony. People aren't refusing help. They're rejecting hopelessness dressed as policy. Meanwhile, those who remain in places like Navotas are often portrayed as stubborn or illegal squatters. But that narrative ignores the real cause, a system that grows taller but not wider, that builds condominiums for investors, but no shelters for the people who clean them. It's not just a gap in wealth, it's a chasm in opportunity. In 2025, Metro Manila's housing backlog is estimated at over 7 million units. That means 7 million families either live in overcrowded homes, substandard shelters, or have no permanent residence at all. The urban poor, including those in cemetery communities, are left competing for scraps in a housing market designed for everyone but them. And the result, a generation growing up beside tombstones, not because they chose to, but because they weren't given any other choice. Urban inequality in the Philippines isn't accidental, it's structural. When economic growth is measured in stock indexes and GDP percentages, but not in the number of families with running water, electricity, and safe shelter, then what we're witnessing isn't development. It's displacement. And it's not just the residents of Navotas who are affected. It's the security guard who works 12-hour shifts but can't afford a one-bedroom apartment. It's the janitor who sweeps marble floors in BGC but sleeps in a shack built on stilts. It's the child who studies by candlelight because the electricity was cut off again. These people are not collateral damage. They are the backbone of the city, the invisible workforce that keeps Manila running. And yet, when policies are made, they're the last to be consulted, and the first to be forgotten. It's easy to blame the poor for staying in the cemetery. Much harder to admit that for many, it's the last place that hasn't turned them away. Because until housing is treated not as a commodity, but as a human right, cemeteries will continue to serve as shelters, and policy will continue to fail the very people it claims to protect. In the heart of Manila's forgotten edges, Navotas Cemetery tells a story far bigger than concrete tombs and makeshift homes. It's not just a place where the living and the dead coexist, it's a living monument to the people left behind by a system that promises progress but forgets equity. The families here raising children atop graves aren't seeking pity, they're seeking dignity. What they've built is not just survival, it's community. It's resilience in its rawest form. This documentary isn't meant to shock for the sake of it. It's meant to reveal a deeper truth that urban development, when driven by numbers and not by people, can create cities that shine on the surface, while burying poverty just beneath. Navotas is not an accident. It's a reflection of policies that never reached the margins and of voices that were never heard in planning rooms or budget meetings. We believe that no one should have to choose between a roof and a grave, that no child should call a tomb their bedroom, and that no progress should be celebrated if it comes at the cost of millions still living in invisibility. So as you reflect on what you've seen, ask yourself, what does development really mean if it leaves entire communities behind? If this story moved you, if it made you pause, reflect, or see Manila through a new lens, consider supporting this journey. Like the video, subscribe to NVL Travel Documentary, and share your thoughts in the comments below. We explore untold stories from places that don't make the travel brochures but deserve to be seen. Because travel isn't just about going places, it's about understanding lives, even the ones lived between tombstones.